guys, welcome to The Real Deal of Hollywood, and today we have an exceptional guest, one of the most successful martial artists, kickboxers, and action movie star, the one and only Don the Dragon Wilson.
Well, good to see you, Victor. Thank you for letting me speak to your audience, and I look forward to the interview.
Today we are talking about your successful story. Question 1. How did you become involved in martial arts, in kickboxing, and then moved along this path?
Well, I've always been involved in athletics ever since a little boy. Ever since I was small, I was athletic because I grew up in Florida in the 50s and the 60s, and they had, at that time in the U.S., it was called segregation. Black students didn't go to school with white students. It was white schools, black schools, and then I was like the only Asian in my school. They didn't know really where to put me, but they put me with the white school. And when I went to high school, they closed the black schools and they bused them into whites. So I had no group of people. You know, I was a different race, mixed race, half white, half Asian. And so to be accepted, I got into sports. And I found out when you could shoot a basketball and you could play American football, everybody likes you, but they don't care what race you are. And I became the MVP of my high school football and basketball team. I was the best basketball and football player in the school because I wanted to be liked. And when I was 18, my brother introduced me to martial arts. He was already a black belt in Kung Fu. And we sparred a little bit. I had done some boxing, so I thought I could go with my brother. But he basically taught me a lesson that martial arts is for real, and you can really defend yourself if you learn how to kick and punch.
What was your first competition?
My very first tournament, I was a white belt, and it was in 1972. And 72 or 73, but anyway, it was early 70s, and I went to the Battle of Atlanta, it was called. It was one of the bigger tournaments in the United States. It was in Atlanta, Georgia, and I was in the heavyweight division then. I started off, I was 205. Wow. I was big. Yeah, I played football in America. You had to be big, and I was only 17 then. And now you can see, like, I'm 185 now, and I fought many years at 175. So 205 was a bigger dragon. I was a large economy-sized dragon. And so I started big, but then I trimmed down, I got down, and I fought as a middleweight, and that was in 1974 was my first pro fight.
Which of the tournaments was the most important for you in your career?
Well, you know, I had many. Well, we don't call them tournaments, we call them fights, just like boxing. You know, there were fights, and they're world title fights, and you have to be a contender and prove that you're worthy of a championship title. And I had many. I won 11 world titles, by the way. I'm in the Guinness Book of World Records. And in 2015, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'm the first kickboxer inducted into the International Hall of Fame, Sports Hall of Fame. Wow. And it was at Arnold's event, the Arnold Classic.
Welcome, everybody, to the International Sports Hall of Fame, Don the Dragon Wilson. Don Wilson is widely regarded as the greatest kickboxing champion in history. He is known outside the world also as a movie star with over 40 internationally released action movies. Upcoming in 2015, his newest movie, The Martial Arts Kid, will debut this year, and he was recently in The Scorpion King 4. Don entered the international stage as the first Kung Fu practitioner to win a world kickboxing title. He got the nickname The Dragon from his White Dragon Kung Fu style. Over the next decade and a half, he won 11 world titles in 4 different weight divisions from 5 different sanctioning fighting bodies. Along the way, he defeated 13 other world champions, amassing an amazing record of 73, 5-2, 49 by KO. His 61.2% knockout average remains slightly better than boxing's greatest Muhammad Ali at 60.7 average. He's also listed in the Guinness World Book as the most acknowledged and greatest kickboxer in history with the most world titles. My buddy, Don the Dragon Wilson. I gotta give you a
The kickboxing came about because my brother was a promoter of kickboxing. And so in 1974, he asked me if I would fight on one of his shows, and I said yes, and I fought. My first fight, I lost the fight, broke my hand, I had to get it reset, and it cost more money than I got paid to fix it, but I loved it. I loved the sport because you could actually hit people. Imagine if you're doing martial arts. In my day, in the beginning, there were no pads, and nobody used boxing gloves, and we never touched each other. We just threw, it was like playing what they call in America touch football compared to NFL football. where you could really tackle somebody. Yeah, we couldn't really hit each other, so it did not feel realistic. And as a martial artist, I wanted the realism. I wanted to really learn how to defend myself. So in '74, I turned professional, and I won my first world title in 1980.
It was a long path, and it's difficult to become the champion, but it's even more difficult to hold the title.
Hold it, yes.
What was the most challenging during all these years?
Well, like you said, holding the title, I held it for 10 years, by the way. I won it in 1980, and I held it the first time I retired was in '85 to move out to LA to be an actor. But I came out of retirement, and I fought again until '90. And so my light heavyweight title I held from 1980 to 1990. So a 10-year reign as the top light heavyweight in the world at that time. And I contributed most of it to the people that trained me. I had two really great martial artists that I worked out with, and I kind of copied. One was Benny the Jet Urquidez, and the other was Bill Superfoot Wallace. I actually trained with both of them, and they have completely different styles. But I was able to take what worked for me with Bill's lead leg kick, multiple kicks, and Benny Urquidez's aggressive kind of a power style, aggressive style, and I being a counter fighter was able to use what I learned from those two great U.S. champions, and yeah, I was able to beat fighters all over the world. Thanks to them.
How did it feel?
Well, like I said, I liked it even when I lost. So, I won most of my fights, so it feels really good when you win. I actually have a couple of, many firsts. I was the first fighter to fight on ESPN in 1979, and they went on to put a show on every week after that. But I was the first fighter. I was the first fighter to fight at Kickboxing, to fight at the MGM Grand Hotel. The first one to fight at the Caesars Palace Hotel in Vegas. I have many first Kung Fu stylists to win a world title, because all the Kung Fu guys they said couldn't fight. And I was a Kung Fu black belt, and I said, I'm going to prove that wrong. And now they don't say that, by the way.
Oh.
Nobody says, the Kung Fu guys can't fight.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, well, it's not just me. There have been many other Kung Fu people who did not like that being called, non-fighters.
Non-fighter, yeah.
Bruce Lee was a Kung Fu stylist, wasn't he? I mean, nobody calls him somebody who can't fight. But anyway, there was a conception that among martial artists, that the Taekwondo guys could kick and the Japanese guys had power and could punch, but the Kung Fu guys couldn't fight.
Oh, I see.
And so I had something to prove.
So you've been the champion for so long. Do you teach right now? Do you have any students?
Oh, no, I teach seminars now. I travel around the world. I was just in Barcelona, and it was the last seminar I taught. I taught at their Hall of Fame. But I travel around the world, and I teach seminars. I call them dragon fighting seminars. And people that ask me what I teach, I tell them I teach everything I wish somebody had taught me. So it's very easy, because there's many things I was not taught, and I learned it the hard way in the ring I learned to block right hands by getting hit by them. And if you take a Don Wilson seminar, you can learn it, and you don't have to get hit. I already got hit. And everything I teach is practical. I don't teach theory, because I actually did knock out 48 professional kickboxers. So if you can knock out a professional kickboxer who's trained his whole life to fight you, some guy on the street that's untrained, just a criminal, he wants to take your wallet, or he's a bully, they're very easy to deal with for me. People say, well, that stuff works in the ring, but what about on the street? Well, you know what? It's like if you're Bjorn Borg or you're Jimmy Connors, and you go up in tennis against a street tennis player, somebody who once in a while picks up a tennis racket. There's no competition, right? You can understand how a guy who once in a while gets into a fight cannot go against a top world-class professional fighter. And anyway, so as a martial artist, I improved my martial arts style by doing the 28 years of kickboxing.
You have just mentioned that you moved to LA to start your acting career.
Yep.
What was that? How was that experience? How did you get in?
Well, the idea for it, well, everybody's got their own story, and I'll tell mine, but the idea came from Chuck Norris. He was going to my fights, and he was the same as me. Chuck Norris is the only actor who started off being famous as a fighter. And then Bruce Lee put him in, and that's why Bruce Lee wanted to beat him up in Return of the Dragon, because Chuck was known to be the top fighter of his day in the 60s. So he started making movies with Bruce Lee, and then he started his own films. And Chuck used to go to my fights, and he suggested that when I retire, that I should move from Florida, which is on the East Coast, all the way to the West Coast, and get an agent and try a movie career. And I thank Chuck always, because he was the first one in the business that suggested I try it. And it worked out for me. I've starred in over 30 films, been acting for 30 years. And yeah, I've got some really exciting projects this year that I'm really excited about. Because they're not, one of them anyway, is not even a martial art film. It's just a really great independent film. So I'm hoping, I don't want to jinx myself, so I'm not going to mention the name of it, but I'm hoping I get the part. But yeah, my career has gone from being a fighter to doing only martial art films to doing action films, and now to just appearing in all kinds of movies, comedies, love stories, all kinds.
Which of the film projects is like the closest to you, the most important?
Well, I don't know about the importance, but the closest character that I ever played to me is Thomas Hoshino in Red Sun Rising. And it was for HBO, HBO World Premiere. And they are re-releasing it in Germany in October, by the way. It's a movie I did in 1994, and it's being re-released with new artwork and interviews and all kinds of things, and updated, you know, high def, whatever they do, in Germany in October. So I'm excited about that. But as far as up-and-coming projects, I have one that's kind of like an art house film. It's a very, very risky kind of film for any actor. If this all happens, I'll be the first martial art actor to work as this character in this kind of a film. But I can't say very much more, because it's very controversial too. It's a little bit like what Van Damme did. Remember, Van Damme played a movie himself?
Yeah.
And he played a guy who got stuck into a bank, and then they checked up on Van Damme and they thought, oh, his career's not doing so good. Maybe he's robbing the bank. And so Van Damme played himself in a movie. Well, this is not that kind of risky, but it does have a unique risk value to play this character in this kind of a movie. So we'll see if it happens later this year. I am going to do the sequel to The Martial Art Kid. The Martial Art Kid came out about a year ago. It's a action comedy family film, and they've got the script, and I've been reading it. It's pretty good, and it's going to be more action this time. They decided that's what sells the movies, the action, and they're adding a little more well, they're still going to have comedy, but it's a little more action than the other one had. And I think that's because the audience feedback was they'd like to see a little more martial arts. And so we'll be doing that movie. And yeah, that's two that I'm working on right now.
Did you have any connection with China? Do you plan to work with China? Did you work with China?
You know what? I fought 6 times in Hong Kong, Kowloon, actually. Yeah, I had 6 fights there. And I won all the fights. I got pretty popular. And my first film was a Chinese film. It was called ABC in Chinatown. It was shot in New York City. And ABC means American Born Chinese in Chinatown. And I was the bad guy. I was the bad guy, yeah. And so that was actually my first film. It wasn't even in America. It was only for the Chinese audience. And right now I have an opportunity to do a TV series in Beijing. And it's based on Blood Fist, the series of movies that I did, the Blood Fist TV series. Henry Luke, LUK, has bought the rights from Roger Corman, and he's producing the TV series in Beijing. And so we'll meet later on this month, actually. Henry's going to fly back to the U.S. and we'll have a meeting about, you know, what kind of a role I can play in the TV series. But it's a definite thing. I mean, he's already bought the rights, and it was quite expensive to buy. Yeah, he bought more than just my films. He bought many of Roger Corman's films, probably over 100 films.
That's exciting to see in a TV show in Beijing.
I've never done it. I've never done TV, and I was only in Beijing in 2010. Jackie Chan, Jet Li, and I went to support the World Combat Games. It was a big athletic event, but didn't get much press outside of China because they weren't really interested in anybody else seeing it. You know, they do things for their own people. It was on their TV every night for like a week. But yeah, I told them I thought I could get it on ESPN and whatever, but they didn't pursue it. They said, oh, it's okay. You know, we'll just show it here.
Well, it's a big market. It's the biggest market right now.
Big market. Well, you know, I believe could have been a big market always because it's a big country, but it's been kind of closed.
Since you are successful martial artist, the champion, and successful actor, I would ask you twice 3 tips of success for being a champion, successful champion, martial artist, and then 3 tips of success.
Well, you know what?
For actor.
Believe it or not, there's a lot of similarities between the things I did as a martial artist to improve myself. It translated it to the film industry. And Chuck Norris, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I we did a TV show together once. You know, I've known Chuck forever, and I met Arnold through my former business manager. we did a show for ESPN because Arnold had, for the first time, martial arts in his event, the Arnold Classic in Ohio. So me and Chuck flew there to do the commentary. So the three of us talked briefly about how we were all came from sports. We were all told we couldn't do it. You know, we would never have, well, Sean Penn, my best friend was Chris Penn. Sean Penn said, Don, they don't write roles for 6-foot-tall Asians with Southern accents. He said, you're not going to get a job in LA. They don't write scripts for people like that. And what happened, Sean, was they write them for me now. They don't write them and then tell me to try to be the person. Yeah, scripts are written for me. So same with Arnold. When Arnold came, he said that Chuck and I had an advantage. At least we could speak English. And I did admit, when you go, if you can't speak the language, imagine trying to be saying, I'm going to become a big action star. Well, Arnold, when we did the TV show for ESPN, Arnold was the #1 highest paid actor in the world. He did Terminator 2, he got $15 million. Chuck had just started Walker. Walker was the #1 action series in the world. And I was, according to Time magazine, they put 4 pictures of actors up, the top 4 direct-to-video stars. And I was one of them. So I was in the top 4, according to Time magazine, which is, if you get in the top 4 of announcers, you could tell people, I am in, that's a big thing for Time magazine.
Yeah.
You know, it's you know, one of the big publications in the U.S. And at that time, I had my picture there as being a successful direct-to-video star. So we all 3 used what we did in sports to translate. Now, I'm not going to separate the two because the same things I did in sports worked in the entertainment. One thing is, when you make the commitment that you're going to do it, you're going to get feedback from people, and you think you want to trust the closest people to you, which is your mother and your father and your best friends. And I'll guarantee almost, especially with the film industry, it was all negative. And with kickboxing, people would tell me, Don, you know, there's been no kickboxers from Cocoa Beach, Florida. Where I said, well, I'll be the first champion. And they asked me, you know, so first of all, you don't believe the people who say you can't do it. You know, I think it might be Confucius. He said, the man who believes he can and the man who believes he can't, they're both probably right. You got to believe you can, no matter what people are saying. That's the very least negative thing you'll come up with, is the advice of others. Because there's going to be many trials and tribulations. As a fighter, there were injuries and fights were canceled and I couldn't get a network contract. And there's a lot of, and you cannot let negative things stop you. You got to accept them and make your mind up, be committed to overcome them. So #1, don't believe what people tell you. #2, you've got to be committed enough and thinking positive enough that you can overcome anything. And then, you know, and this is something I just, you know, I was doing an interview. They're doing some children's books. So I was doing, and I was filling out a form, and he said, list 6 important things for somebody who's reached success with you, like you have. And I said, be a humble person when you do accomplish your goals. Because if you become a jerk, or I don't know if this is R-rated or not, but if you become an asshole in the midst of your success, the success means nothing. Because that's still not anything we look up to. That's nothing to be proud. If you're going to you get the fame, you get the money, you get the power, the prestige, and then you are not compassionate to other human beings, then you've lost. What do they say? It's like selling your soul. You may have accomplished your goals, but those goals ended up worthless because of the type of person. The type of person you are is much more important than what you have. Who you are is more important than what you have. So those are the 3 things. You know, don't listen to the naysayers. Don't let any negative things stop you. Believe me, it wasn't a straight line right to the top in kickboxing. I broke my jaws, I broke my nose, I had stitches, broke my hands many times, my feet. I mean, you're going to have difficulties. You just can't quit. You know, the guy who quits doesn't make it. Yeah. You know, nobody gets a gold medal if when the going gets tough and they pull a muscle or they get sick or whatever, they quit. If you quit, that's the only way. You definitely are a loser then, because you've lost. If you get back up, there's still a chance you're gonna win. What did Rocky say in his movie? It's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get up.
And keep moving forward.
Right, and well, he said that too. He'd keep moving forward. Because I guess you could get up and turn and run the other way. Yeah. You don't get the world title that way. But yeah, I use that as an athlete, and I use it as an actor, and it worked for me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Guys, you have the most precious advices from the champion himself. Keep moving forward and stay tuned.